Indeed. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Hip Hop, the Preach and Teach. We are sitting here with Rob Problak Gibbs, Dr. Tara Betts, and Enzo Silon Surin. And we are here to talk about the ways that hip hop shapes our lives as art practitioners and as educators and activists. So we could do like that dry thing where like I read this bio of all of the incredibly luminous accomplishments of all the people on here. But this is hip hop, so we gonna freestyle. The yes. So the in the chat there are the links to all of these beautiful people's websites, so you can read the bios, you can click the mission, you can check out the work samples, you can buy the product, all of those things. Please just, especially if you are meeting someone tonight, make sure that you check out these websites so that you can get a better idea of who these people are. And definitely you'll be that much more excited because you got the inside dimension by being part of this conversation. So welcome everybody. Or I'm from DC, I should say everybody. All right, so I'm gonna have everyone introduce themselves. I want you to tell us who you are, where you are, and what you got going on this summer. Let's start with Dr. Betts.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tara Betts. I'm here on the south side of Chicago. And what do I have going on this summer? I'm doing some readings for my new book, Refuse to Disappear. Prepping to teach a couple of writing classes at DePaul in the fall with young poets there. And working on an anthology manuscript that will probably be under consideration at the press very, very soon. That's all I'm going to say for now.
Oh, you're so mysterious. She's like, I feel like we just got some breaking news.
I'm trying not to
low.
On
the low. All right.
Talk about it.
All right. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to, whatever has happened, we just going to send the good energy for the proper manifest on whatever it is. Yes. That's what we talk about. Bam. Bam. Thank you so much. All right, Rob, who told us that it was okay for him to call us Rob, even though we are in a hip hop space. So Dr. Betts was very respectful enough to ask if we were supposed to call him Problak. But you can be Rob, right?
Yeah. What's happening, everybody? My name is Rob Gibbs, but I go to artist name by Problak. Pro is for Black is our people. And I'm born and raised in a small but large, nationally known part of the city of Boston called Roxbury. I'm currently in what's known as historically Roxbury, in our downtown area, and like at the gate of the financial district with me and some fellas I've been painting with for the past 30 years. We've just accomplished doing a massive mural on the facade of the Rose Kennedy Greenway. The first local artist to touch that wall and laid it down for the city. I also work at a program that I co-founded 30 years ago that we're doing our summer programming for all the young teenagers in the city of Boston. So we're going through our 7-week program where at the end of the summer, we're going to come up on a real big celebration date for all the teenagers' artwork that are participating in our studios. And, on the weekends, I just continue to put some paint where it ain't. So catch me outside.
That is what's up. Thank you so much. Problak. All right, Enzo, where are you? Who are you? And what you got going on?
Right now, I'm coming to you live from St. Martin, a beautiful island of St. Martin, enjoying it. I'm actually working on some revision that's due to my publisher for my next book, American Scapegoat, which comes out next summer. So I'm excited working on copyright permissions and all that stuff. But I was born in Haiti, but I came of age in New York City with hip hop. So I kind of feel like I grew up with hip hop with that. But I make my home is in Boston, Massachusetts. So I got a little bit of everywhere, in my history. Yeah.
Thank you, Enzo. All right, so since you talked about growing up with hip hop, I feel like we are all in the unique position to be really the first generation of kids who grew up with hip hop. I mean, I track hip hop pretty much from the age of 6 or so through the soundtrack of my entire life, right? We're the first generation that can do that. So can everyone just share a little bit about your first encounters with hip hop and when that was and what was memorable to you about being introduced to this music how old were you, at that point in your life?
Oh my gosh. I have a few of them, but I'm gonna name one. My mother was the one who bought all the good music in my house.
Okay.
My grandparents had a jukebox in the tavern downstairs. They didn't play a lot of rap, even though it was a Black tavern, Like I think maybe at one point they had the Grandmaster Flash song from Beat Street on there, but there wasn't a lot of rap on there. And they had one song on there that was called Crack Killed Applejack. Those were
I remember that song.
It's so old and most people don't know it.
I remember that song.
But those were on the jukebox. However, my mom, other than she would get everything that was good, I remember 2 records she bought. One of them, there was a record store that was in like electronic store on Court Street, which was the main street in Kankakee, Illinois. And she got the first Purple Rain they took out of the box, the first Purple Rain cassette they took out of the box at the store. But she also got Curtis Blow. And I can't remember which album it was, but it's the one where he's shirtless. And I remember my mom and her best friend sitting outside playing it on the boombox and talking about how cute Curtis Blow was. And she denied it. But later on, her best friend recently confirmed it and was like, yeah, we were doing it. So that makes me very happy.
All right, so that's one of the jewels of your early memories of hip hop. Okay, Rob or Enzo?
I'll take this next because there's so many of
right.
them. And you gotta imagine, I grew up in a household where, like, instead of getting an allowance, I was getting a 12-inch or a 45
Nice.
at the end of every week.
Nice.
My dad put me on to my first hip hop record, or what he would call the rapidy rap, right? And speaking of a piggyback on Sister's Curtis Blow experience, my first rap album was Basketball. It was the single.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing basketball. So I just, there was no, we like that best. So there was no album artwork. It was just a 12-inch brown cover. It was when I learned that was what they called it, because that was like the art showing that it was 12 inches. But my jam was the 45 from I forget the name of the group, but it was the Smurfies dance. You know what I mean? Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Smurf that body across the floor. So that was my joint. That and jam on it. You know what I'm saying? So like those were the records I was going off on. My hip hop experiences was learning these songs and getting everything down pat. Because at our grandmother's, we spent the night every Friday, and like we used to do our version of the lip sync show I was out back then called Putting on the Hits.
Mm-hmm.
We was lip syncing all these hip hop joints, and like you had to know that my cousins was hardcore, so like I had to have my rap down tight, so I was doing everything. But I would say the first rap experience that blew my mind is when we saw the music videos, because again, we had our grandmothers,
Mm-hmm.
and Ma always made sure that we had hip hop because that was our sound, that was our music. Little did we know that'd be a part of our lifestyle.
Wow.
And I've seen the Kumo D video. How you like me now? We had these joints.
Mm-hmm.
He had these goggles, and it was like, I was like, damn, is that one of them characters I seen brought to life? But if it came down to my putting on the hit session, everybody knows me for doing LL Cool J's "I'm Bad," because when you had to forget Oreo and eat Cool J cookies, I had
That's
that part
right.
on
That's right.
smash,
That's right.
So that was it, you know.
That's what's up.
My hip hop experience is
Well,
family
I'm
bonding.
bad. I'm bad is the first hip hop song I knew from start to finish. You know the jump where you sit there with the paper and you rewind the tape and write the lyrics until you know the whole thing. Well, I spent a whole weekend, one summer with my cousin Tanisha in Roxbury, rewinding LL Cool J and learning "I'm Bad" and "I Need Love." That was like our joint. And I would say we were young there. That we were young then. It's interesting because I associate my love of hip hop as being born in Boston. I'm from DC, but my parents were divorced. So my mom lived in DC, my dad lived in Boston, and I would spend all my vacations, in Boston. So all summer, all spring break, all, Christmas, I would be in Boston. And my cousin Tanisha that I'm talking about, our families lived in one of those typical Boston multifamily houses. So we lived in the same house and we were up and down each other's stairs. And her brother Keith was the one that turned us on to hip hop. So whenever we were upstairs, he would be playing like Yo MTV Raps. It was the music videos that really turned us on. And her brother Webby was also like a phenomenal bass player. So we just always had music around us. And it was really Keith that turned us on to hip hop, because when I was in DC, I was listening to go-go. So I always think of kind of my beginning cultivation of hip hop very much being connected to that time of being little in Boston. So even before I knew you in Boston, Rob, my hip hop association definitely started there. Yes, indeed. All right. So Rob, you were saying, you go from Kool Moe Dee in this character who is part of this new phenomenon that is starting to become part of like your life soundtrack, to this thing called hip hop becoming part of a lifestyle. You said that you're like, who knew then that it was going to spark a whole dimension of what would be your life. So when did you feel it shift from just something cool that you were listening to something that was going to have that much more impact on your life?
It had to been when like it was either Easter or when you were going back to school and you wanted to dress in something that nobody had, but you wanted to represent who you were from, again, what you would never known was the cultural standpoint. You know what I mean? Like you would have some people that would dress according to like their favorite basketball player, or the football team or basketball team in Boston at the time, whatever represented the block, that's what dudes was wearing. But I was like, man, if I wanted to wear Kango, or if I want to take the laces out of my sneakers and not get beat for walking around and almost breaking my neck, I was doing it to mirror after my favorite hip hop superheroes or heroines, you know what I mean? And like anything that we knew that was something that mirrored like, yo, I know what's happening, I know what's going on, I'm hip and cool. But when you were a kid, it was a limited access to certain things. So I wasn't running around with no gold chains or like, rings and things of that nature. But that one Adidas suit that stayed under the mattress stayed pressed. You know what I mean? That those sneakers that you would pull out when you're going out to a party or something, you always kept them clean. So it was just when you had to put on what would almost be a uniform when you're going out to party and showcase like, yo, I'm paying attention to what's happening. I know the beat. And there were certain MCs who were just wild with it. So like if you was going for that Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 thing, like, the rabbit's foot hanging off your jeans, or the raccoon tail, or like that was too wild for me, and I couldn't get caught with no shirt on like I was Melly Mel. But I'll rap like them brothers in no time, you know. So I
Indeed.
did what I think was appropriate for kids to do at that time, you know.
That's super interesting because basically you're saying is that the way it it first infiltrated was through your style, right? Which is
Hmm.
such an important part of your development, right? That time in your development when you start to establish who you really are outside of, what however your parents used to dress you up, right? So that development of your own personal style is like a key milestone in life. So you're saying that's the way that hip hop kind of first entered. That's super interesting.
Indeed. If I could stand like this all day and not say nothing because I thought it was the coolest thing, I would have done that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got in
Yeah.
trouble for taking my first class photo. Yeah, I have class photos when I'm busting the b-boy stance and I'm embarrassing my parents. Yo, like I was that dude.
So, what about you,
Yeah.
Enzo?
Well, it's fun.
When did it go from to like the thing you're listening to like a lifestyle?
Well, the funny thing is, I was still thinking about the discovery aspect of it, and I realized that, like, being a Haitian kid in the household, like, for me, I had to sneak rap into the conversation, right? And by conversation, I just mean it was me, like, with my headphones. Like, it was back when the radio just, like, I mean, we take it for granted that you can listen to hip hop all day, right? Rap all day now, right? But it used to be at a particular time, and so it was kind of like there was something else playing, and I just left the radio on, and then it was probably 8 o'clock, and there was this siren that went on, and I was like, "What's going on?" And then DJ Red Alert came on. I was like, "Who's that?" Right? Siren and all coming in all big, but I couldn't listen to it because in my house that was the bad music,
Yeah.
right? That was the bad American music. So it was kind of like, my dad had all his records, Stevie Wonder and all that other stuff, right? So then eventually I learned to put on my headphones to listen to some of this stuff. And at some point I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what they're saying, but it feels good and it sounds good. And so I had to hide, hip hop, anything hip hop. And so I didn't even dress that way because it was the same kind of thing. Like, you don't dress like the Americans, It's a particular lifestyle. But as Rob was talking about the gear and everything else too, it became one of those things where if you had a good jacket on, you better kiss that thing goodbye. Because somebody was about to get it from you. And my dad knew that. So a lot of it was about protecting me from. So I didn't look hip hop at all, even though my headphones were always on and there was always some beat, going on. LL's my bad, I'm bad, Kumo D, how you like me now, Eric B, and Rakim. And I'm from Queens, but I had this love for Boogie Down Productions. Okay, so every time I say that, I need to make that statement before so that folks know that I'm not giving up my Queens allegiance. But one of my favorite songs was "The Bridge Is Over."
Bro, I was just thinking. I already was
Way
hearing the
before I
bridges over my
knew.
head when you started talking.
It was Nas that gave me the permission to actually even make the statement in such a public way, because it's like as soon as that beat dropped, you're like, dun 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 dun,
It's
dun, dun,
undeniable.
dun, dun, dun,
It's
and then
undeniable.
whatever that was, I was like, whatever. So there was some Caribbean feel to it. I was like, and I'm bopping to this, right? And so I think for me, the transition was more about embodying hip hop, right? And the culture. And because I grew up 3 blocks from the Coliseum Mall in Jamaica, Queens. And so we'd run into rappers all the time getting their, their gold chains, getting their gear and getting things, the spray painted jackets, all of that. And because LL's from Queens, we always run into LL. Ran into him at a check cashing place. I was like, "Yo, that's LL," and he did his usual, the piece. So for me, it was as much as part of the culture, right? Because we knew these folks, like they weren't necessarily stars to us, right? Because they were right in the neighborhood, and so in A Tribe Called Quest and all those folks. So for me, I kept it hidden for a long time because, again, as a Haitian kid growing up in a Haitian household, like rap music, hip hop culture, and all that was not, encouraged.
Enzo, I find it so interesting that you say that because, and you said, kind of the response to that is, you don't do like the Americans, right?
Yes.
When in fact, to be Black in America is really a diasporic experience. And yes, you have the descendants of traditional, what are they, whatever the people call themselves now, the descendants of North American slavery, or I don't know what they call it. But all the Black people in the United States do not have long roots in the United States,
Yeah.
right? And so many of, and especially in New York,
Yes.
so many of the, in fact, like iconic founders of hip hop, people like DJ Kool Herc and Africa Bambaataa, people like Peppa and Slick Rick and Special Ed, Heavy D and Grand Poobah, all of these people have a Caribbean background. So it's not even an issue of like how Caribbeans do a take on an American thing, because the American experience is not a monolith. So it's literally you doing you by having a Caribbean response to hip hop. And I think it's just super important to say, because even a lot of Americans will often say, oh yeah, well, Caribbeans adopted hip hop because they think what Black Americans do is cool. No, we're all in the soup, right? And so not only is that's not even down the line from the very foundations of hip hop, there's a very strong Caribbean, and then and all the way through to people like Biggie and Foxy and Wyclef, and I mean the list goes, Busta Rhymes, the list goes on and on and on. So it's just, I find that super interesting that once those people became first generation in the States, their creative expression became American then, and then somehow divorced from their Caribbean identity.
Yeah, I think that's been interesting to me, even in teaching students and talking about the history of hip hop, because it never fails that I have at least one student in the class who's like, what? When I say the founders of hip hop were Black, Caribbean people, and Latino folks.
That's right.
And then they're like, what? I'm like,
that's right.
Like Black people they see, but they don't see that. And I'm like, then I have to show them pictures and be like, this is Charlie Chase. DJ Kool Herc was getting records from the island from his mama and his sister, and this person, and then they were like, what?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's something about how hip hop has changed over the decades, where people somehow think it's this amorphous thing that, everybody can do. No, everybody cannot do it because everybody didn't start it. I mean, you can practice the craft, and we see that across cultures now, but it's like, you weren't the originators. And I think it's important to keep stressing that. Like, where did it start?
Where did it start for you, Tara?
Tara Betts. Okay.
Tara Betts, where did it start for you? Dr. Betts, where did it start for you?
Well, I'm gonna be honest. My parents refused to spend any money on anything that was like hip hop looking for me ever. I think my youngest brother got to take advantage of that more than I did. But I do miss, and I think we've talked about this, Lisa, that girls wore more clothing back then. Like, you wore the big baggy jeans, you wore like a really cute shirt. At one point, everybody had the patent leather shoes because you could dance in them.
You wear overalls.
Right.
I mean, you was all the way covered up. You know what I mean?
I miss that. Like, and I remember in my early days being a teaching artist, I used to wear overalls to go teach because I knew the teachers were not going to wear that. And the kids were like, whoa, she's wearing real overalls. We're going to look at Rakim for our poetry lesson today. Like, now that would be so dated. But I think at the time, and this was before, like, now I'm seeing all these people who create curriculum who are doing the things that we started like over 20 years ago. Like, let's analyze his lyrics. Let's do our writing prompt based on that. Let's think about how do we improvise in writing as well as in aerosol art or freestyling. And how do people do that in dance? Like just getting kids to think about that because that's what they were excited about. And now I see all these people trying to emulate that, and I get so frustrated because I'm like, you're doing it because you think it's an easy entry point and not because you love it. But in terms of where it started for me, other than hearing that music in my neighborhood where I grew up, LL Cool J and KRS-One, I think one of the entry points for me was MC Light. Because I wanted I mean, Salt and Pepper was dope, and everybody knew Salt and Pepper. But MC Light was so different to me because she was one woman rapping by herself, and Paper Thin was just
Paper Thin. Like, she was so savage. She said, "Just like a test, I crammed to understand you."
Yes,
I mean, she was just like relentless.
Right. You know, in fact, I describe those who even try to look into my eyes and see what I am thinking. That dream is over. You gotta sink it. I was like, girl, the yacht is sinking. You know? And it's like,
glad my name wasn't Sam.
Okay.
Like if you got that whole album, she was just treating Sam the whole album. But I suspect Sam was just easy to rhyme with.
That's funny. Practical choices.
You know, and I literally remember, I mean, other than also on WGCI, which is Chicago's main radio station. And this was that time that Enzo was talking about when they didn't play a lot of hip hop on mainstream radio stations, but the main urban station here in Chicago is GCI. And there was a white DJ named Bob Wall who had a big scandal, and he got fired a few years into being there, but I'm not going to get into that because it was real creepy. So anyway, he played hip hop in the morning. And my parents sent me to Catholic school with all these white kids. So I'd be ironing my little shirt and I'd be listening to Bob Wall. And I remember he would hear Slick Rick. Shoot, I can't think of what the other one is. Rappin' Duke was definitely one of them. Dougie Fresh. You know, like those are the ones I remember being the earliest memories. But I also remember around the same time, people started break dancing a lot in my neighborhood. So I had friends who would always come to me and be like, yo, you got some cardboard boxes? Because you would flatten out the cardboard boxes, put them on the ground, so you'd have a smooth surface to spin on. And if somebody's parents tore out their linoleum floor, they would take that too. And just take a piece of it. You know, which if you tell kids that now, they're like, oh my God, what are you doing? But if you didn't have a dance studio or a venue to perform in, that's what you did. So they would do that in the park, not far from where I live. And sometimes I would go. I couldn't do a lot of the dances. I think a lot of dances are really difficult for women to do if you're doing the top spin and all of that, or the back spins and whatnot. So I think I was doing mostly like popping and locking. I would go out and pop and lock and watch people. So it was a sweet little time, you know, as a kid to see that grow, especially before it was on MTV and in those places that were intimate and close to us.
Yeah. All right. So Rob got it through the style, and Tara got it through the dance. She was out there popping and locking. Did you have anything you want to add to that, Enzo?
Well, I was going to say, because it's like a lot of what you described was public, right? Like with the style and even with the dancing. For me, it was, I mean, the only way I could play hip hop in the house was when the DJs were on, because they played instrumentals, right? And so then I would pop my tape in and I would copy as many of those beats as possible. And then I was sitting there listening to it, and then all of a sudden I could rap in Creole, right? Or I could just say whatever it was in Creole. Like I didn't have to keep up. And so for me, like hip hop was always this private thing that brought me so much joy. And then eventually I was like, I was a shy kid, you know, I was sensitive. So I Need Love by LL. I was like, yes, finally, you know.
He said, when I'm
Somebody can,
alone
you
in
know,
my
somebody can
room,
sing, you know.
starts out when I'm alone in my room, sometimes I stare at the
Yes.
wall.
I'm
And
like,
in
that's
the back of
me.
my mind, he was getting, you know, I hear my conscience call.
I
Trying
was
to
like,
get
that's me.
vulnerable.
He's speaking to me, you know, and then you start to realize that the other stuff too matters. But like if hip hop could speak to you in that way, and so I guess the clothing came when I got a job and I could buy my own clothes, right? So that came a little bit later on. But before that, it was the music, but more importantly, the lyrics. And so I learned English by copying down rap lyrics
Mm.
because eventually I wanted to know what they were saying. And so whatever I could write down, and then I would repeat it, and then I would use it to speak. And then I definitely picked up the vernacular, but the lyrics were everything. And so out of all of this, I said I was never really an MC, but I wrote a lot, like notebooks full of rap, but I could never rap it, you know? And eventually I was like, it takes a certain skill to develop the tongue speed to do that. But I was like, if anybody want to battle me, I can go notebook for notebook. You know, nobody ever had a freestyle battle with notebooks. Like, hey, who can write the best lyrics? And boom. But so for me, it was about that. It was privately, but it was great joy, though. It was a great joy to listen to those beats.
It's, you know, it's so interesting that you talk about those notebooks because so many of us, you know, had a notebook in some way, shape, or form. A lot of people were, you know, writing rhymes or even just notebooks full of writing somebody else's rhymes. I'm just thinking I would love to see a like museum exhibit of like these notebooks. You know what I mean? Think about
Yes.
how many notebooks are out there of kids that just were doing what you were doing in some way, shape, or form. That would be dope.
Yeah,
That would be
that would
dope.
be cool.
Yeah.
I know they have the Cornell Hip Hop Archives. They have some of the original notebook entries from like the first parties that Cool Herc did. Like you'll
Yeah.
see flyers, like handwritten flyers in the collection where they're like, come meet us at Sedgwick in the party room. You're like,
Yeah.
dang, they wrote it on notebooks.
On
And
a
then
notebook paper.
it started to upgrade where they did the cut and paste with the line art stickers that you would put on a like stuff that kids now would be like, what is that? Well, how did they do that?
Yes, yes. But the
So,
thing is, though, and I think for a people who are constantly criticized or judged for our level of literacy, for particular these kids that are coming out of the neighborhoods that this music is coming out of, you got these kids filling notebooks. Like we write what we want to write, though. Like I will get this pen and I will get this paper and I will fill this whole notebook. So I also think it's super interesting and beautiful. It's just I just think that Black creativity is in its essence interdisciplinary. So it's so beautiful that this expression of hip hop has what we all know as the five pillars. Can anybody sound off what the five pillars are? I know you
Can I
know,
show some,
Dr. Betts. I know you know.
I'm being quiet because I talk too much.
Go ahead, Rob.
Hey, I'm trying to show some Zoom etiquette and raise my hand with the little black hand I got in here. So we got MCing, DJing, B-boying or B-girling, right? That's three. We got graffiti, right? And I'm messing with y'all. So you got B-boy, B-girling, MCing, graffiti. Why am I sound like I'm repeating myself? Because I got more than the five. You know what I mean?
You probably got a whole pantheon. Yes. But the point
I
is,
know, but
that,
it's
you
the
know,
four. Yeah, the four
but
pillars. That's it.
isn't Black art always interdisciplinary, right? Because it comes out in more than one way, right? So you know, you writing rhymes, but them rhymes got to go over music, and there is dance that comes from that, you know, and there is visual art that comes from that, and this visual art, which is actually changing the landscape of these neighborhoods by, you know, beautifying them with this art that is expression of this, you know, of this music that's coming out. So there's so many different ways, and that's why I was super excited to talk to all of you, because you all are different kinds of artists who have thoroughly integrated hip hop into not only your artistic practice, but into your teaching. So, we have a visual artist here, but we have two poets here, right? So there are so many different ways that hip hop expresses itself. I'm going to ask you all another question, but before I do that, anyone who is in here who wants to sound off in the comments, if you have a question, a comment you want to share, just a hallelujah, what you want to throw up, please go ahead and put it in the comments, and we will definitely share it with the group so that we can get the panel to respond to it. Tara said in the comments that knowledge is the fifth one. Oh, she also said that Chuck Brown did a dope go-go cover of LL Cool J's I'm Bad. He did. I remember that. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay, so you all have this hip hop that has infiltrated your lives in all of these different kinds of ways, really become symbiotic with your lives at this point. So how did it then, we're talking about how there's these different kinds of expressions of the music. So how did it make its way into your own creative practice, right? So now it's this external thing that's part of a culture that, you're part of, but then you are all creatives, and somehow it made its way into your creative process. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened and how that's been for you?
I kind of mentioned I was shy and I wasn't going to be an MC, but I approached every poem when I started to write poetry like it was a rap, because of you mentioned the Caribbean influence, and so there was always music playing around the house, right? And it's funny when you listen to one of my dad's records, and then I heard a rap version of that same record, right? And I was like, wait, what's happening here? And then they were like, oh, and of course people were like, oh yeah, the DJ was scratched. So I took my dad's record.
Uh-oh.
In a regular turntable, okay? I didn't know about the special needles or whatever. So I was like, oh yeah, shoot. I'm gonna come up with this, DJ Enzo in the house, and put on the Stevie Wonder record. And I was like, oh, it don't sound the same. And I didn't think anything of it until my dad played the record like a couple days later, and it just kept skipping, right? He was like, and then he was like, who did this to my record? And you could see all the scratches. All over the record. So I was like, okay, DJ is out. And so, but it became about that, right?
DJ's out.
So I approached, I think poetry was inevitable for me because I love the idea of, and I didn't know knowledge was like officially, right, that fifth pillar, but I was always interested. I was always gravitating towards rap that was telling me something. It was okay if you got me to dance, but if you were dropping knowledge, that's why for a while the Queens rappers were about, dancing and partying and everything else. And they'll claim that too, right? And then Boogie Down was like, I'm gonna make you dance, but I'm gonna drop some knowledge as well. I was like, oh, and then Public Enemy was like, hey, I got something for you too. And of course, Eric B. and Rakim was like, look, I'm all deep thinker and knowledge and all that stuff, right? And then, so for me, it was like, I can do this on paper. Like, I don't have to do this on a record. Like, I could be
I see.
an MC, but more so lyricist, right? Which is the term that we,
Right.
and I said, I can make a record on paper, like the beats and everything. And so I would listen to the beats and then I would write a poem to the beat. But when I would read it, I wouldn't rap it. I would read it like a regular poem. And so, so that was my way of infusing hip hop into, and I do it till this day. And I
Wow.
title my collections like they're records.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
refer to my books as albums till this day.
And you also made the your chapbooks. So Enzo is also a publisher in addition
yes.
to a writer. So in our poetry collective, the next verse, he was like, we're not doing a chapbook, we're doing a mixtape, but it's a book. It's a mixtape, but it's a book.
'Cause I was like, we're not gonna wait for people to put us on, right? But in hip hop, you didn't wait for a record company to sign you. You just put together a mixtape, and then you shut down a party. All of a sudden, they want to produce you, right? They want to sign you. So I said, what if we did that with poets too? Poets whose names are not necessarily recognized right now, and no one is checking for them. So if they're walking around with a chapbook and they're doing a reading, someone's like, hey, can I get more of what you just did here? So in a lot of ways, I took that 100% from hip hop. Like I wanted to drop a mixtape, and my chapbooks are small too. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can put them in your pocket, you can carry them like it was wherever you go. And so I was just like, it's the modern day Walkman, you know. You're putting that book in your pocket and just walk around and pass it around. And I wanted us to do that, and it was 100% because of hip hop culture. So
Yeah.
thank you for recognizing that.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for sharing that, Enzo.
I know it had me thinking about too, just tagging off of what Enzo said. Like we hear a lot about the DIY aesthetic in the rag girl movement, in the grunge movement, but hip hop was like the DIY for Black and brown people here in America, and nobody
Mm-hmm.
gives that due to
Mm-hmm.
that particular part of the movement. Like for me, I definitely think as an early reader of poetry in my childhood, like there was Maya Angelou, Anisaki Shange, Paul Laurence Dunbar. Those were the three Black people I saw right away in the library,
Mm-hmm.
and knew they were Black poets. Um, but to hear hip hop and to hear the way language was manipulated and to do these things that were referencing things that I knew in a familiar kind of way, that was kind of the bridge in language for me. And it made me think about meter. It made me think about illusions. It made me think about alliteration, like all the things we try to teach kids when they write now. And it was just so powerful and resonant to me that it kind of just followed me through the rest of my writing life. And I tend to think about writing in some musical, like I think about playlists and like how do you sequence a manuscript that way? Or I've been doing this one writing exercise where I get kids to look at a song they know and go to whosampled.com, go back and listen to the original song and think about what's the relationship between those two songs, or is it tied to a memory, and write the poem based on that,
Mm-hmm.
for the reflection that it gives you. And some of them are like, wait, I didn't know this was a sampled song. I'm like, most of them are. And they sample from all these different cultures too, which that, it didn't happen as much in early hip hop because, like you were saying, Enzo, a lot of people in hip hop, they were borrowing their mama and their daddy's records.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer Stover, a scholar in upstate New York, is working on that, like interviewing the mothers of hip hop legends and researching these record collections. Because, like Africa Bambaataa, a good amount of his record collection that's been archived was his mother's records. And
Yeah.
nobody talks about that, how important indirectly these women, these mothers were as curators of hip hop culture.
That's an excellent point.
So I'm really excited to see what she writes and comes up with out of that.
Yeah, because really the music that was being sampled, that's your parents' music. Just like Rob was saying, you start getting your first albums, but you're sampling music that's what your mama had you listening to when you was cleaning the house on Saturday. A lot of times,
Right.
that good soul music that's being like reinvented. So that's such a powerful, it seems so obvious, but I never thought about that way. What you said about the idea of Black and brown parents being curators of this music in this way, that's such a beautiful idea. Rob, how did it come from an external thing to part of your own creative expression?
This is so heavy and super loaded because I would nerd out over hip hop in such a way that, like, in our little clique, you had to master the elements, right? And you would know that the elements combined would make something that's undeniable. And it didn't matter how much you try to MC, DJ, or B-boy, right? Like, you couldn't just put on a sweatsuit, start spinning on your back, and it made sense. Or, to Enzo's point, put the needle on the record and just start jamming on the one. Like none of that came overnight, or you pick up a can and it said fresh on it and you spray it and something dope comes out of it. So what I started to learn in reference to just like wanting to be good at just about everything so that the conversation is universal is that it wasn't just about elements no more. It's about a discipline. You know what I mean? Like anybody I knew that mastered whatever it was that spoke to their voice, it made them the masters of that craft. You know what I mean? And the one thing that we all shared was our process, our creative process, discovering and unlocking that. And so when you had everybody that would like, you know, you would only be able to stay outside for so long until when the street lights came on. What was you in the house doing during the winter when it got dark early? You was mastering your craft. You know what I mean? And the older that I've grown with hip hop, I started to understand that this became like hip hop is my superpower. You know what I mean? There's things that I know. There's ways that we communicate. There's a language that's spoken where like I put on my headphones and I'm walking, I turn on Nas, it teleported me to Queens, and he's talking the same narrative from where I grew up at, from a different set of projects, 4 hours up north. You know what I mean? Like if I wanted to dive into the West Coast and wonder what was happening in Oakland, I'm listening to the whole Hyro clique. So there were other regions where like there were other brothers and sisters practicing this culture where like we all connected without us even knowing, you know? And when you go to a show, for everybody that's listening and like shows is a big part of it as well. So you wanted to, you know, make sure that you've seen the music live and direct. The music video did something different. We would stand out for midnight releases for albums. You know what I mean? Like the people that you would meet in the time of that, the only time you got to really just kind of separate yourself from that is when you crack open that tape, you crack open that cassette, that CD, and you're going through the album art, you're reading the credits, you're nerding out on how am I dissecting what was given to me so that I can at least some part in my life probably make it. You know what I mean? Where it becomes a part of when it's your dietary need, it becomes a part of your DNA. And then you grow with it. You know what I'm saying? So like everything we did that mirrored probably, you know, how we seen our moms and pops rolling or other adults or what we were learning in school. Like minds knew how to apply that to something that was so deep, but yet so new because we were told it wasn't gonna last.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It was like, yo, it's not even why y'all investing your time and energy into that, but to the point of a Public Enemy album coming on, there was a sense of urgency that made you pay attention to what was these brothers saying, you know? There's a reason why the golden era of hip hop is called the golden era, you know? We know how gold is made. And it's, you know, it's from the earth. It's from, we made something out of nothing. So when I feel like this is my superpower, I can hit a conversation from any aspect, any point, courtesy of an MC that took me through what is a master's class, depending on their body of work, you know, and just knowing that it wasn't nothing overnight. You know, we have everything that other cultures reflect. We got one-hit wonders, you know, we got depth and you know, blood memories in our music and in artwork and anything that we create that we digest. So, man, this is such an amazing conversation because I never knew how much this plays out in my life on down to like it's innate in my daughter, and she doesn't even know why. You know what I'm saying? This is going to be a new superpower for another generation. Yo, they're going to make movies about this stuff.
Since you're bringing up your daughter and your superpower, I am going to see if I can. I'm hoping that I can share my screen so that folks can see this piece. Okay, I'll see if I can get it up in a second. Enzo, I'm trying to share my screen, but it's not being my friend.
Your green button is on though, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is, but I would just love to be able to share this piece from Rob. Actually, I'm going to see if I'm going to ask a question now, and Enzo, I'm going to see if I can send it to you.
Okay.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to forward it to you, and then I'm going to ask another question. And by the way, please, again, as I said, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments so that I can share them with the group and share them with the panelists and get your voices in on this conversation. We do have a comment here. Maya said, I really miss the lyric book being available with CDs. Spotify has a lyric feature, but not everyone adds their lyrics and the system isn't always correct. And then Tara said, Rap Genius is the best lyrics transcription with annotations that she's seen. Spotify is disappointing on their transcription though. Yeah, and we've talked about, right, how interesting that you're so moved to this work that like you want to have these words, you want to see them in front of you, you want to write them down. This notion of the power of these lyrics and how you want to manifest them in your life. These notebooks that we're talking about, literal and metaphorical, are just yeah, it's just a very powerful thing. So go ahead, Enzo.
I was gonna say one of the things that, I mean, at some point it became, you know, record companies trying to save money, right? Because it was less that they had to print. But I think, and I'm forgetting the law now, but that crazy law that came out in New York, right, where rappers were starting to get caught up in cases because somebody was sitting at home, not listening to the music, but they're reading these lyrics, right? And then these words were being used as transcript in court cases, right? And so a lot of folks were like, because when you rap something, you can say, that's not what I said. And for, well, nowadays, right, for 9 out of 10 of these rappers, you'd be like, hey, it could be that, yeah. I love when people like remix lyrics, they're like, this is what they said. And it sounds exactly, you know, like that. But there is the essence of, like, we want, you know, access to that, but at the same time, these lyrics are being used against, you know, a lot of these rappers as a way of, oh, it's a transcript, even though they say no, it's a work of art,
Wow,
right?
as a transcript.
Right? And so then literally they would like copy and paste, right? Because you know the lawyers are not sitting there listening to these records, you know, and saying,
Right.
okay, so, you know, after the beat dropped, after the second verse, you said this, right? It's like they're reading this stuff and they're taking it verbatim. The RICO law, yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that reason, and I stopped seeing lyrics everywhere for a while. And Rap Genius, like you said, Tara, was like the one place I'm like, man, what is this fool saying? Let me go look, you know, and check. And then people started to take it, right, on their own in doing that. And I was like, oh, that's what I was doing as a kid. So for me, it kind of like goes back old school, right? Like we stopped wanting to copy down lyrics so that we understand what's being said, because it was, and then eventually it was made available to us. And then when it was taken away, we didn't ask why it was taken away, but the rappers knew, you know, they didn't want to be on record. They
Right.
want to be
Literally, they want to be on a record, not
right, on a record, but not on record.
record, not on the record.
Yes. Yes.
Indeed. Indeed. So I wanna segue now, and Enzo, see if you can pull up the mural with Rob's daughter in the middle, because he was talking about superpower earlier, and you were talking about this connection, this creative expression being your superpower, and the power of legacy, you know, that comes with that, and that you're passing this down to your daughter. And then you actually have this, hopefully we're going to be able to get this image up, is a physical representation of this notion, a piece of art that has come from that idea. But, you know, also as educators, we have a lot of babies, we have a lot of kids, you know, so the idea that you all have all touched on this notion of relationship, this notion of legacy, and using the improvisational nature of making a way out of no way, the DIY Tara talked about, to blaze these trails, to be able to bust down doors for ourselves, hoping that then they will be open, very much understanding that they will be open, hopefully for the people, who come behind us. I think that's a very powerful quality of hip hop, like Rob said, for something that we were told for so long was not going to last. It has now become not only a piece, a kind of art, but a pedagogy, a way of life, a way of passing on legacy. And so I wanted to ask you, Rob, I mean, just to see your daughter in that Adidas tracksuit in front of that boombox, says so much. Like, this is a hip hop baby. You know what I mean? Look at this image, right? And that if your dad does that, your dad is a superhero. I mean, can you all imagine the scope of this? That is a building. That is a skyline. Okay. We are talking about actual superhero work. So Rob, can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to make this be the piece that you splashed on the side of a building, and how that power of hip hop becoming a legacy has made its way into your life?
Ooh, where do I start? This wall has in the past, it had hosted different artists from different parts of the world who came to Boston to do murals on this particular, on this particular building. This building is in place of what used to be the highway that ran above the city skyline going into the north shore of Boston. When everything being rebuilt and put underground, they have these certain areas where these buildings are like ventilators to the tunnels. This is one of them. Mm-hmm. So, been doing a mural series since 2017 called Breathe Life, and it's been making a lot of noise. So I think people have been expecting, it's kind of like, when you're an MC, people are waiting for that next album and they're mm-hmm. comparing it to the last. So with these albums that I dropped in the city, I was just going to try and do something that would be like a maxi single or that in between the next project. And this was it. I have a crew of creatives who will, we all graffiti writers, but like everybody's taking strengths in different areas. And this particular image was taken by my man, Gabriel Ortiz. Annually, I have Bobby taking pictures with this boombox as she grows, like every year. Wow. She's a different age. I have her like she was sitting on top of it. Another year she's like, legs dangling. And so I'm that annoying dad that's gonna be every year, get in front of this boombox, girl. So that photo that he took of her when she was 3 years old, it like the composition was so crazy. And for her to be standing in front of this boombox is a family heirloom. This was the boombox that's in my grandmother's crib that we listen to everything on, And so me and my cousin would take it outside. I was the one that got caught with it, you know what I mean, and got my ass handed to me. But go figure. Years later, when I asked her about it, and it was at our auntie's house, I still have this boombox to this day. So there's a beautiful photo that I've been blessed with that it came to a oh shit aha moment when I was staring at when this project was proposed to me by the Greenway. Shout out to my girl Audrey, that came and was like, yeah, we would love for you to do something on here. And I kept saying like, yo, what the hell would it be? And I'm staring at all the previous murals, and then I'm looking at the wall blank. And I'm looking at it on the big screen in the living room. And then it hit me. I was like, yo, the composition of this building demands this idea to help folks, especially young people that I'm communicating to, feel like they're welcome to this part of Boston where we don't chill at. You know what I mean? This is the gateway to the financial district. So I wanted to do something that was intrinsic. Something that felt normal, felt natural. Like when a shorty sees it, be like, yo, you know what? I belong here. Yeah. I wanted the young people to feel like this is their city and that, this is a place where you should be. But knowing that this building is naturally like a ventilator to the tunnel, what better way to, complement this composition by putting the boombox on there, turn the building into a boombox and amplify this message. And while it's amplifying this message, you got this little Black girl who took a moment to squat down in front of you. And people had coined this to be the face of the city, but she's squatting down and she's showing you where the heart is at. She's looking in that direction, So at that point, when you see that she's squatting in this composition, just imagine when she stands up, she's just as big as every skyscraper that's around her.
Wow.
So it was just, being real mindful of what type of composition this building deserved, taking a classic black and white photo and celebrating it so that the skyline of the city frames it real nice, throwing grass on the ground, just playing on the green space, and then sprinkling these nuances in there where, like, if you're from Boston, we all know what Boston is about. It's about the trees and the trees. So I don't gotta say nothing about her rocking the Adi sweatsuit or the the shell toes and the Velcro shell toes because she's a baby.
She's got
What I mean? But like, this is just one of those things.
Shell toes. Love that.
Velcro shell toes. You know what I mean? And the showcase this piece of hip hop that our grandmother gave us and sharing it with the city, sharing it with the world, and sprinkling these nuances in there where, like, it's hip hop from head to toe. You know what I mean? You got the purple tape in there. Everybody know about the purple tape. It's really only built for Cuban links, but the streets coined it the purple tape, and we know that how impactful those brothers in Wu-Tang were to us in our lives. And the purple in the composition, where you see it from the tape to her beads on down to where the radio station dial is at on our Black station that was here, WILD 1090. Like, there's a lot of playful things in this piece where, when you look at it or you see it in person, there's a lot of stuff to, like, take in. And then just to put the gold behind her is just giving her a crown, celebrating that halo. So there's a whole lot of things, man.
It's so interesting that you mentioned. It's so interesting you mentioned these details because that's what's popping up in the comments. Like Melanie, beautiful down to her lavender hair beads. Tara said, I love the gold around her head like a halo. Like, so that they're even, you talked about these details being amplified, and clearly they are.
It is. This is a celebration, and to be the first Bostonian on this facade and doing what's necessary. I just want to welcome people to our city. And this is how we get down. We're here.
That's a way to say we're here. It's a way to say we're here. Tara says she wants this image on a t-shirt. She's not gonna lie.
Oh, okay. There were shirts made for the event. I'll send you one, Tara. You got that.
I need this. I'm going to just respectfully raise my hand and say that I need this in my life as well.
Yeah, I might need the thick snap.
I got you.
Por favor. Por favor. I gotta be Rocky and Bobby down here and
Por
say
favor. Yeah. And just to indeed.
I'm also down to write poems to go with pictures. I love doing that.
Amazing.
Yes.
That's what it's about.
The amount of detail in that painting, because you can call it a simple work of art, but it's not so many layers, right? And it actually continues the conversation about how, and I think, Tara mentioned this earlier, how innovative hip hop was and how hip hop is responsible for a lot of groundbreaking innovations, like to single-handedly change the way that they made boom boxes, because you required the boombox to be a certain way so that the bass is bumping the right way, like the air horns or whatever it was, right? Like, we changed that whole thing, like, and to the point where we own it, right? And so it's like this crazy idea that, that hip hop, is just a music thing, right? But from clothing to engineering, you know, to the way sounds are produced, to the way people sample records, right? To the way, and it's just like this innovative thing that keeps feeding and feeding, and I love the image of your daughter because it is always the next generation. Like hip hop has always been about, you know, the next generation,
Mhm.
because it's kind of like bringing and grooming people in from, you know, from however young they were, and with that pose, I'm afraid to battle her in a freestyle. I'll tell you, for real.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, hey, Merlin. I see Merlin is here
Oh
on
man,
the
yeah. She
Zoom. They trying to get you down here to St. Martin, Rob. You know, I already had my eye on it, right? I was like, and there are murals all over the island, and I was like, wouldn't it be great for Rob to be able to come down here and meet whoever it is behind these murals and just some magic happen? Merlin done planted the seed. His name is Mad Twaz, and there's murals all over the city, all over the island. I don't know. We might have to have that pro-black energy popping down here in the Caribbean real quick. Real quick. All right. So Enzo and Tara, I asked both of you to bring it. I hope you brought at least one poem that might be inspired by this conversation. All right. So you both have one on deck. Just want to make sure you got it ready. If you don't, you know, just plug it in real quick, and then I'm asking another question so it's ready by the time y'all finish answering this question.
I don't
We're gonna
just
close
yet.
out
I
with
can't.
we're gonna close out with the poems since we got the art. But I just want to ask one more question, because I want to bring it back to the village. All right.
Okay.
So Rob was talking about, you know, this power of legacy passing on to the children. You know, you all are educators. So I do want to hear real quick, Tara and Enzo, about how hip hop has affected what you do in the classroom. And I would also say, and this is why I say bring it back to the village, is that, you know, that has been the nature of hip hop for us to make a way out of no way and to create these spaces. And they're not just for ourselves, right? But can we break this ground? Now we've not only broken ground for like other people around us, but like future generations. We are now people who are in there. Hip hop is like 50 years old. You know what I'm saying? So it's a really powerful way for us to, this is our iteration of preserving our culture and creating a space for ourselves. I mean, and not having to ask anyone to make the space for us. And so I'm curious, Tara and Enzo, before we have you read a poem to close us out, can you talk a little bit about how you take it into the classroom? How is it that you use it to connect in the communities that you are part of?
Well, I know I try to get students to see when I've used it in college courses how there's been all these phenomena that hip hop has impacted. And I've done like some initial survey stuff with them. A lot of times I would teach Jeff Chang's book, Can't Stop, Won't Stop, which to me, even though I wish there was a follow-up to it, because it kind of stops at that point where we're all in the same gang and all of that stuff started to happen. But it's really good at talking about the roots of where everything started. So I like using that book. But one of the other books that I've liked using in the classroom is the book about Jay Dilla's Donuts that's in the 33 and a third series, because the opening chapter is so beautiful. Students just can't, they're like, wow, I have never heard of this artist. And then I'll be like, he's probably the one hip hop musician you've never heard of, but you've heard him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just start writing all the names of people he's made music for on the board. And they're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and how, you know, I talk about that story that was on Code Switch, how they found all of these tracks that he did that were in a rental space. And the guy who basically purchased what was left in the rental space gave everything back to Maureen Yancey. So now we'll have Jay Dilla records for however long. And they're just like, what? You know? And in that book, they really do a good job of detailing the musicianship that has been going on for generations in Detroit. Like all these Black musicians in jazz, in funk. The only thing they left out was a band called Death, which was the proto punk group that was all Black dudes.
Mhm.
And now, since there was a documentary made about them, there's kind of been a resurgence where like one of their kids is in the band with them now, which is so wild when you think about it, right? Like we've been a little bit of everywhere, and then it's like it becomes a footnote. So if you're in, you might not learn about it unless you're in a college classroom,
Mhm.
you know? So kids now, it's like they think hip hop is just like this thing that's a phenomenon in commercials, when really it's this thing that we really don't know much about in the mainstream sense.
Thank you, Tar. Before you answer this question, Enzo, I just want to give a moment of thanks because the professor who sat me down and did for me what you did for your students in regards to Jay Dilla was Rob. So Rob, I would like to thank you for introducing me to Jay Dilla, putting me on, schooling me, Jay Dilla, Slum Village. I learned all that from Rob. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
A great service you did me. Thank you very much.
Oh man.
Many years ago, but thank you.
I love writing to Jay Dilla. I want to check out that new book, Dilla Time. So bad. It's been sitting in my stack.
Enzo, how does it make its way into your classroom or your teaching style?
Well, we talked about how hip hop is truly innovative, and for me, it was always about the evolution of language, right? And how we can, flip things in a heartbeat. You have to figure out a new way to come up with saying something, because somebody will call you out and say, "Man, we don't say that anymore. We used to say that yesterday." Or, as you're rhyming, it's like we've heard that before, and so you're like, "Oh, I got to scratch this out." And so I kept thinking about how all these writers were in this laboratory because they had to come, with the freshest rhymes. And so different types of metaphors, different types of personas. I mean, after a while, it got a bit wild on how big these personas got to be, right? But then the costumes started to be affected on stage, and then the dancing and everything else. And so when I talk to my students about, the birth of language and how they acquire language, I always say, how did you come to say this? Where do you think it came from? Who gave, and they're like, oh, we just always said it. And I said, well, why is it that certain things don't last? No one is walking around saying what's crack-a-lacking anymore. And they're like, Professor, oh my goodness, I was like, I'm not ashamed. And I'll be dropping some old school stuff, right? And they're like, I don't know what that means. I said, yeah, look it up. Don't call me old. I ain't old. I'm mature. I'm a veteran of these words. And so look it up because they're feeding what you. And I used to look at my students who was like, you're wearing skinny jeans. You think your generation invented skinny jeans? And so if you're going to wear something, know where the other stuff came from. And so I talk about the evolution of language and how we shouldn't get stuck with saying things in exactly the same exact way or how people want us to say them. And so I do this exercise with them and I'll say, okay, all of you know the words I love you. And so the exercise is to come up with a different way to say I love you. And then I'll break them up into groups and then the class has to vote. And so whoever is the best with this expression, that's the term we'll be using from this point on. And so I said, now who gets credit for it? They're like, well, our group did. I said, well, 10 or 20 years from now, you think people will remember your group? And they're like, probably not. I said, that's because y'all don't have a name, right? And so now they start associating that. So I said, what's the difference between what we just did and an author writing a book? And so how important is the title of that book? How important is the arrangement of words in that book? And all this is a lit class. They didn't think they signed up for this. They're like, so what does this have to do with introduction to literature? I said, because introduction to literature is FUBU. They're like, say what?
Yes.
What's
Yes.
FUBU? I said, well, look that up too. And I was like, it's for you, by you. And it's for us by us. So don't think that these authors are just like writing randomly in some vacuum and that they don't care about the content of the book or whoever reads it. And so I take them through the whole thing so that they learn to appreciate there's no such thing as old school.
Mhm.
There isn't. We can all learn from that. And people are biting the styles from from back in the day anyway. They're repeating the same thing that we used to do back in the day. So if it's old school, it's the new school now, right? So that's how I weave it in. I just make it relevant to them in terms of, and language to our students is extremely important.
Yes. Thank you. This is powerful pedagogy we are talking here. Powerful pedagogy fueled by hip hop. Thank you all so much for being so generous with your wisdom. And I think one of the most powerful things about hip hop too is that it really amplifies the power of relationships. And so I really appreciate all of you because we all sit in relationship with each other. I am lucky enough to count all three of you in my inner circle. And as I told you when we first started, the biggest goal that I wanted to have was to be able to share this conversation with everyone here who's joined us, but also that you all would all now know each other once we leave here. And if you think about all of the work that everybody has talked about that they're doing, know for sure that when the camera is off, we across our disciplines are supporting each other's work. This is why we are sitting together, right? Again, that we are blazing these trails by working in relationship and community with each other. So I appreciate you all for being the way you are in this landscape and for spending this time with us and being so generous with your wisdom. All right, so we're going to close out with two poems. I'm going to say we're going to start with Enzo, and then we're going to close out with Dr. Betts. Hold up that book, Dr. Betts. Hold up that book. Refuse to disappear. If that does not encapsulate hip hop, I don't know what. They told us it wasn't going to last, y'all. The book is called Refuse to Disappear. So we're going to hear from Enzo first, and then Tara is going to read from her newly dropped poetry book that all of you should get ye to the chat. Click on the link and buy 2 copies, one for yourself and one for somebody else because you're going to want to share it. All right, Enzo, what do you have for us?
This is a love poem to New York City and to hip hop and to the block that I grew up on in Queens. So Elegy for 161st Street. It's from my book, When My Body Was a Clenched Fist. 5 furious years after Grandmaster Flash penned a rap about edges, you zigzagged the corners on Run for Benson and Hedges. Back when the zeitgeist of the block was cracked and your father had that used pale blue Pontiac he would dash the family into on Friday nights, trying to counter the myopic pull of the block's high danger of dope fiends and the debilitating euphoria in a whimsical gaze waylaid like mazes. You sat in the back seat and uttered under your breath. Why would anyone ever trade in palm trees for these qualm nights, for the menacing overtone of a smile without teeth? Because you've come to learn the most important lesson is to master your own gaze and strut, for the days when soon enough you'd be spit back onto the same strip of block where twice a woman with eyes belonging to that dragged out and quintessential gaze proffered you an act of fellatio for $5. You were 10 years old on an errand to buy milk in a flagellous galaxy, but carried the weight of a bid on all future runs to the grocery store, when the concrete sparkled like a sky full of stars under your feet. You were grateful for the drift of Friday nights, when street telemetry took a back seat to the only sign of life, a magnificent breeze against your face.
Thank you, Enzo. Can you hold up that book? Are you reading from the book?
I'm not, because I don't have a copy with me.
Oh, wait. All right. Go ahead. You read, Tara. You start reading, Tara. I'm going to grab that book.
Okay. So, since you did a little bit of a longer poem, I might do this one. It's not too long though. So, and it's kind of a list poem based on a notorious quote from a Chicago rapper who remained nameless. Because hip hop, unlike slavery, was a choice. because the arts classes disappeared as buildings burned and ashes fluttered midair like insurance checks, because the government claimed a broken window theory where those animals could not avoid breaking everything, because those animals had ancestors who knew slavery and colonialism like second and third languages, no ESL required, because Robert Moses came through the borough like the expressway was his personal Bushido blade, because mothers in the rundown apartments that survived collected small flat spheres of vinyl joy, because they were never ashamed to dance and always spoke in codes and rhythms, because breakbeats needed to be carried on the spoken wings spread by MCs taking pride in making people sweat, because aerosol cans rendered swirls in geometric orders and colors imagined by God's hands brushed across dust, because there were no schools that said they were civilized, even though their lives were burglarized daily, because Zora Neale Hurston interviewed the last surviving slave brought to America, but she couldn't profit from publication, because Black Benji died too young. So did DJ Scott LaRock, so did MC Trouble, so did Left Eye, so did B.I.G. and Tupac. Need I go on? Because Chicago made Shaka Khan, Curtis Mayfield, Muddy Waters, and Chess Records, and the city paints over them like fading murals. Because there are mothers of MCs who are educators that learned the rhetoric of sit-ins, because eventually there were books and teachers that documented the languages in the past we felt obscured from textbooks, because people struggle to keep those books in print, and others will spend their last on fresh kicks because of the obvious sharecropping, Jim Crow, KKK, microaggressions, separate and still unequal paychecks, and misogynoir. Because de facto segregation stays holding hands with gentrification, since they've been tight like that since they first got together. Because Black and brown people always create seismic shifts, then give them a way to allow new fissures to crack, because someone will always make more money off that than creators, and the estates revert to people who ain't family, because slavery is still the favorite fodder of American movies, where people love to watch suffering, because no matter what you buy, where you live, who you marry, or how much money you have, free thoughts are contained.
Woo. Dr. Betts, hold up that book. Refuse to disappear. Y'all saw how fast I went over there and got this one. When my body was a clench, that joke was, my arm is long. It was almost long enough. Okay. When my body was a clenched fist. Get these books on your shelf, get them in your life. Please go online onto Rob's website and check out his work. It is phenomenal. It is mind-blowing. And try to remember scope, right? So remember that you're not looking at a canvas, you're looking at a building when you look at that art, right? You're looking at a building. So thank you so much for all of the modern hieroglyphs you have splashed across Beantown, my friend. Much love to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us and spending your Thursday evening with us and letting it rock. Because I said we were going to do it for an hour, but you know that's what happens with the cipher, and the vibe was there, and I'm just letting it roll. So thank you. We appreciate you. And as our friend Russell Simmons over at Def Jam used to say, thank y'all for coming out. God bless and good night.